Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
G'day, Nils Vesk from Innovate or Die. Welcome to this series where we're going to be looking at ways that you can bring commercial innovation to your organisation and your business for great commercial gain. So you might be thinking, innovate or die, what a serious topic. Well, the reality is, unless we're innovating, we're either competing on price or we're playing catch up, trying to chase our competitors as they go out and capture the market. And innovation is such a crucial key element that we all need in our businesses today. And when I've worked with organisations around the world, there's one common problem that I find, and that is that there are too few innovations and they're just too far apart. And the number one cause behind all of this is our biased perception. The bottom line is the way that we've been taught to think about innovation has skewed the way that we think about innovating and the ways that we can come up with new ideas. And that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. And in each one of our episodes, we're going to be unpacking a model called innovation archetypes. Because if we can understand the biases of the most amazing professional innovators and use their best principles, then we can use that to create great commercial gain in our own organizations. So let's quickly unpack each one of these archetypes and phases so you've got an idea of what we're going to be doing in each episode. And so we have universally 4 phases of innovation when it comes to it. We've got the investigation phase, ideation, iteration, and commercialisation. The investigation phase is all about looking for insights as to where we should be applying our thinking to generate brilliant ideas. The ideation phase is all about coming up with lots and lots of great ideas. And then this iteration phase is all about testing, piloting and prototyping our ideas so we can minimise the risk while increasing our certainty. And finally, we've got the commercialisation phase. This is all about taking our idea, building it, and then selling it to the masses so we can get a good commercial return. And each one of our episodes, we're going to unpack one of these expert archetypes so we can borrow and model them to get some great commercial results. So let's get ready to rock, innovate or die. G'day, welcome to Innovate or Die. Our episode today is all about how to innovate like a scientist through low-risk experimentation. And this kind of whole concept of being a scientist excites me in many different ways. One, because I originally used to study science, and I also come from a family full of scientific genius. I missed out on that gene. And in today's experience, we're going to be looking at ways that scientists go through planning, inferring, testing, and deducing the way that they would normally experiment, and how we can use that and borrow that and apply that to business. And the interesting thing is when it comes to business, really, innovation in many ways is just about experimentation. And I guess there are 3 really clear commercial reasons as to why we want to innovate like a scientist. And the first one I really do think comes down to the fact that if you think about it, quite often when you've got a hunch or an idea about doing something differently, let's say you think, I want to come up with a new idea that will do this and that, it usually is just that. It's a hunch, it's an intuitive feeling, or you've got an idea that something might work out. And what experimentation does as a scientist enables you to test that hunch to see whether it actually is worth pursuing and rolling out on a larger level, while doing it at a small level so it doesn't have a huge implication. The second commercial reason why experimenting like a scientist and innovating like a scientist is really valuable is that in many ways, if you think about it, scientists are trained to experiment. Really, that's what they do day in, day out. They run experiment after experiment after experiment. So if we want to look at ways that we want to innovate, it makes sense that we borrow from those genius thinkers that experiment day in, day out for great commercial gain. And the third commercial reason why we want to innovate like a scientist is that it gives us certainty in many ways. It gives us the facts and the stats that says this idea is something worth pursuing because it actually does work. Let's roll it out on a bigger scale and get some commercial return. So hopefully that's giving you some inspiration as to why we should innovate like a scientist. And when it comes to innovating like a scientist, there is one really cool poster child that comes to mind that I'm really quite into at the moment. And it's a woman by the name of Elizabeth Holmes. Now, you may not have heard of it, but it's probably worth investigating if you do get the chance. Now, Elizabeth Holmes is the youngest female billionaire in the world at the moment. She's an American. And what she's done so amazingly well is she's created a whole business and a whole revolutionary new technology that relates to blood testing. You might not say that's sounding that exciting, but let's take it where this came from. So I guess Elizabeth Holmes had a lifelong fear of needles. And for whatever reason, she went to university, I think it was Stanford University, and studied chemistry and biochemistry and chemical engineering and the sort. And one of the pet hates she'd always had was that she had a lifelong fear of getting needles done. And she thought there's just got to be a better way that this could be done. There's got to be the technology that surely we don't need to have some super huge invasive needle that really hurts, scares a lot of people, and it's cumbersome and it's painful. So with this hypothesis, this idea that she could actually go out there and make blood testing simpler and easier, she started to go out and run experiments, one after the other. She actually ended up leaving university and asked her professor to become one of the board directors on the company. So she used her university fees to set up this company. And so experiment after experiment after experiment, and she'd pretty much nailed it. 66 patents to her own name, 100 co-shared patents, and over 100 international patents. And so what she managed to do was take this concept of making blood testing as small as possible to a point now that they can actually do blood testing with just a pinprick. So teensy little pinprick. And why I love Elizabeth Holmes' sort of thinking is that she actually borrowed from a couple of the other archetypes that we've mentioned in some of our upper episodes. And one of them is the behavioural archetype, which is identify something that people dislike or have an aversion to. And getting a huge needle is one of those different areas. Not only did she stop there, but she also realised that a lot of patients found it really quite frustrating and almost, I guess, belittling to not be able to have access to their blood tests. They had to wait until they went to see their doctor to find out what was going on. And she realised that people wanted transparency. People wanted to get their results as quickly as possible in the most cost-effective way, in the most pain-free sort of experience possible. And that's one of the reasons why her business, Theranos, is doing huge things in America and starting to expand around the world. So check her out if you can. Okay. So we might not all be interested in doing blood testing, but what we can borrow from this is to look at one of the core concepts of experimentation. And that is that really, if you think about it, innovation is experimentation. If I've got the idea that I want to come up with a new conference or a new sort of workshop on innovation, it's really, if I can test that out and run an experiment on a small group to see whether it's successful or not, that's my way of innovating, and that's what experimentation is all about. If you can think about anything in business, if you want to try something different, it's all a form of experimentation. Scientists, I think, are really valuable in terms of lending their form of experimentation, because what it does is it lowers the risk that we might experience. And one of the things in business that really prevents us often from innovating, whether you're a CEO of a huge company or the CEO of one, or just looking after 5 people, is that fear of innovating comes down to the fact that we're worried that things are going to go wrong, and quite rightly so. What innovation does through experimentation is, if we do it the right way, it enables us to test the waters at a very slow level and a safe level, so we're not just jumping into the deep end or feeling like we're jumping off the cliff and everything's going to go wrong. A good way to think about this whole phase of this iteration phase is about testing. So if experimentation doesn't work for you as a word, you can think of words such as piloting or prototyping, doing trials, as well as experiments. So there's a number of different ways that you can use this same language about doing that. So how does this risk-averse thing actually happen? Well, a good model to explain this is to have a look at some of the different things here. When we come up with an innovation, we're usually scared that if we have a wild guess,
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.